Yeah, the Wirtz deal's now been announced and is complete, and obviously a huge deal for Liverpool.
It's massive. It will put. I can't see another deal unless there's something outrageous happens with someone like an Alexander Isak or something like that, which I can't see at the moment. It will most likely be the biggest deal of the summer. Liverpool have got their number one target. It's been pretty clear for the past 6 weeks, maybe slightly less, that Florian Wirtz was their primary transfer target, and they've executed 116 million all in. It's £100 million fixed fee, with an extra 16 million in add-ons linked to success that Liverpool will have in major competitions moving forward for the time that Wirtz is there. So it's not quite yet at British transfer record level. But it can be if Liverpool go on to win major trophies in the next few years. And yeah, it's expensive, but I think we've all seen the kind of qualities that he has, and obviously the profile. Right, he's 22, so he could have 4 great years at Liverpool, for example, for even 5 great years, and they could still recoup a lot of that 100 potential 60 million pounds that they've spent and committed. So for Liverpool, it ticks so many boxes, and it's a great signing for them. It's a massive signing.
It certainly does, and it's so typical of Liverpool to. There's a lot of talk of it being sort of 115s, 120s, rising to 150 million, but it's kind of typical of Liverpool to actually get a deal like this done for just below the British transfer record fee. So they don't actually end up breaking that record. They end up getting him cheaper than was first thought. They're just so good at negotiating.
Yeah, listen, the optics of the deal, particularly with regard to the sort of the numbers involved, I think Liverpool have been quite keen to maybe express that, we have got a good deal here. We haven't paid over the odds. We haven't met the reported 150 million euro price tag that Bayer Leverkusen had put on Florian Wirtz. It's taken a while for them to negotiate the deal. I think there was some credible reports, really, I think, of the deal that had been completed earlier this week, maybe on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
I think it perhaps wasn't quite there yet, but it was certainly there or thereabouts. And obviously, it's taken 48 hours now to have that deal signed, sealed, and delivered. And I think all that's left now is for Florian Wirtz to have his medical, and he will become a Liverpool player.
Absolutely. I mean, as you've mentioned, the talent is undeniable. 22 years of age. This is why the fee for me. Yes, it brings pressure and expectation on delivery, and we've seen that before with Paul Pogba's and Lukaku's when they've come in for these kind of monies. The pressure has been there to score goals, assist, drive your team over the line for trophies. At the same time, though, at 22 years of age, if he gives you a decade, that's 100 million base. That's what, £10 million a year. It isn't particularly a huge amount of money for a player of that quality. And as you state, if in 4 years, if in 5 years, he decides, thank you, England, thank you, Liverpool, I want to move on to Real Madrid, I now want to go and play for the biggest club in Germany, they'll try and do a better job than with Trent, but they'll renew that deal and you'll still be able to sell him and get a large percentage of that money back. So I think this works. I think it's just win-win for Liverpool in many ways. I don't really think there's any threat of him flopping, as us fans would say as well. He just looks too good. He's sharp. He's got great physicality. There's excellent output. This just feels like an absolute win all round. And as a Man United fan, it's painful, but I've got to be honest, it feels like a real win, Sammy.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think every box in terms of the sort of what you would look for in a transfer has been ticked here for Liverpool. Player, technical ability-wise, tick. Financially, can we recoup the money in the future? Tick. Yes, they can. He's 22. Has he hit his ceiling yet? No. There's room for improvement. Tick. Everything about that deal is optimal really for Liverpool. I cannot see a downside. Look, every transfer has an element of risk, but that element of risk is generally down to someone not adapting to their new surroundings or not reaching the kind of level of standards on the pitch that the buying club expected. But this is probably as low risk as you can possibly get, because this guy is a proper player, and and everyone will say, oh, it's the Bundesliga, the Premier League's a different kettle of fish. Yeah, it is a different kettle of fish, but everything that we've seen from all of the examples of his play and all of the videos, and anyone who's watched him on a regular basis will say he's got every attribute necessary to be a success in England. And yeah, I think he will, and it's an absolute no-brainer of a transfer.
It absolutely is. And just to answer a question here to our viewers that we will interact with live, yes, that is Sammy McBell, as in the BBC's Sammy McBell. This is him in person. You're not seeing things. DJ here says, great seeing Sammy here. I hope for some positive transfer news regarding Chelsea. And DJ will be moving on to that soon. We had a question from Mo, who's watching in the chat. Big up, Mo. I hope you're well, brother. It says, could we expect any more major signings at Liverpool this summer, i.e. maybe a number 9?
I think the focus now will be on maybe moving players out of the club just to rebalance and recalibrate the finances a little bit. I don't think there's necessarily a need to do that, but I think modern day football and modern day finances in football are that there's got to be a little bit of give and take, and I think that the focus will now move towards that element of the window. They've done their business, they've got Wirtz through the door, they've got Frimpong through the door. Now they may start looking at, can we find a buyer for Darwin Núñez, for example? Can we move him out? If they can get good money for Darwin Núñez, I would not be surprised to see them later on in the window maybe go for a number 9. The problem with waiting to go for a number 9 or a striker, and I think most people would agree that they probably could do with one. The one issue with waiting for the outs to go out first is that you obviously risk missing out on the ones that are available now, because there aren't many who are available. If you look around Europe, you could probably count them on one hand, right? Sesko, Gyökeres. Obviously, the one that everyone would love is Alexander Isak, but realistically, is he available?
Yeah. Is there any? I mean, that's been Liverpool's number 1 target. Is there any sort of talk or chatter with the sources you have that Liverpool are trying to make inroads into that? Because the back end of the season, there was a lot of newspaper reports saying they were talking to his camp and pushing. Have you come across any information like that at all?
Yeah, no, not to the point where I've had it verified or been comfortable enough to write it, because I obviously or report it, because I haven't. But yeah, I'd be lying if I was to sit here and say even recently that I've not heard anything regarding Liverpool's interest in Alexander Isak. My biggest, sort of the biggest concern about receiving that info is it financially viable? Because having just spent the money on Florian Wirtz, and obviously a little around 30 million on Frimpong, is there the finances, is there the financial firepower to go and do Alexander Isak? Even say if he was to agitate and make clear that he wanted to move, Newcastle, he's still got 3 years left in his contract.
Yeah.
So it's Newcastle are under no pressure whatsoever to sell Isak this summer, particularly having just made the Champions League. So for Isak to come out of Newcastle, you would have to force Newcastle's hand. And personally, I don't see Newcastle budging for anything less than like 150 million quid. Are they, you know, and are Liverpool going to pay that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Joe, what's really interesting for me is, as you say, viewers need to understand this. That, you know, I'm speaking about you in a third person slightly here, but Sammy's obviously an actual journalist. He's not a fan channel like ourselves, where if we see a report or a rumor that there's talks between Liverpool wanting Isak, we can go live on that and we can talk about it because. And I always say, people often say this to me, Terry, you'll ruin your credibility if you report on this. I'm not reporting on anything. I'm not a journalist. I'm talking about a news story and I'm gathering fan opinion. It's a very different job to what you have, Sammy, where you must get lots of whispers and twitters and little sound bites. But if you wrote an article off of every single rumor and whisper, you'd lose a lot. You and your papers and the networks would lose a lot of credibility. You've got to try your best to wait until it's verified or moving along, surely.
What you absolutely, and I can't stress to you the number of times that I've missed kind of exclusivity on a story because I just haven't been comfortable enough to write it. So I've not had it verified. And you know, there is a risk attached to that, but you're doing it for the right reasons, right? You're doing it because what you want to put out into the public domain, what you want to report is as factually as correct as you can believe you can possibly make it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, for example, if someone was to sort of text me today saying Liverpool are signing Alexander Isak for 150 million quid, right? You know, for starters, your radar's up, is like, because that seems inconceivable to me, having just committed 116 million quid to buy Leverkusen to sign Florian Wirtz. So that immediately you've got that concept of doubt in your head. And then, you know, you would then go and try and check that with the agent. You would then try and check that with the club. And the people will have different ways of operating. Journalists have different ways of operating, but particularly working for the BBC as well. I'd much rather be right than first. And there is, you know, and that does mean that I will maybe occasionally, I say occasionally, a lot of the time, you know, not be the first to report something. But what I prefer to do is to make sure that when I do report something, that it's that I believe it's factually correct.
And that makes an absolute lot of sense as well. Viewers, do us a big favor.